Ever wondered why we yawn all day, but dream of changing the world in a major way? It's the Bored and Ambitious Show.
October 4th, 1957. 200 kilometers above Earth, something new circles the planet. A polished sphere no larger than a beach ball, broadcasting a signal that will change everything. Every 96 minutes, it passes overhead. Americans tune their radios to catch the signal, a sound from beyond the sky. In quiet suburban streets, families step onto porches and look up, searching for a pinprick of Soviet engineering racing through their stars. The implications arrive before the wonder fades. The rocket that launched this satellite could launch something else, a nuclear warhead. The Soviets haven't just beaten America to space, they've proven they can reach any city on Earth. In Pentagon briefing rooms, generals study orbital trajectories that arc over New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. That innocent beep carries a message. Nowhere is safe anymore. For a generation raised on American exceptionalism, Sputnik is an earthquake. The nation that built the atomic bomb, that turned the tide of 2 world wars, has been humiliated by a basketball-sized sphere, because in the calculus of Cold War power, space is the ultimate high ground. Whoever commands orbit commands the planet below. And right now, the Soviets hold that ground alone. The space race begins, not with inspiration, not with wonder, but with fear. America's answer comes 2 months later. December 6th, Cape Canaveral. The Vanguard rocket stands gleaming on the launch pad, carrying a satellite the size of a grapefruit. Television cameras broadcast live to a watching nation. The countdown reaches 0. Vanguard rises 2 feet and collapses. A fireball consumes America's pride on live television. The press is merciless. Flopnik, Kaputnik, Stay Putnik. The Soviets offer America foreign aid, reserved for developing nations. Rock bottom. But in failure, something else emerges. The desperate clarity that precedes transformation. As a boy in Germany, Wernher von Braun read Jules Verne and dreamed of the moon. By 32, he was building rockets, but not for exploration. For Hitler, his V-2 missiles rained down on London, killing thousands of civilians. When the war ended, America faced a choice. Try him for war crimes or recruit his genius. They chose genius. Operation Paperclip buried his past and gave him a laboratory. The man who built weapons of terror would now build America's hope. The moon still called to him. It always had. January 31st, 1958. Cape Canaveral. Von Braun's Jupiter C rocket stands ready, America's answer to Sputnik. The countdown reaches 0. Fire erupts, the rocket climbs, and keeps climbing. No explosion, no failure. Explorer 1 reaches orbit. Hours later, at a midnight press conference in Washington, Von Braun and the JPL team hoist a model of their satellite above their heads in triumph. America is finally in space. The humiliation of Sputnik begins to fade, and the race, the real race, is now on. April 12th, 1961. Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human to orbit Earth. The Soviets celebrate. America scrambles. 3 weeks later, Alan Shepard finally flies. 15 minutes up and down, a cannonball arc that never reaches orbit. It's something. But it's not enough. The Soviets have won every milestone. Kennedy knows the truth. America needs a finish line the Soviets haven't already crossed. May 25, 1961. President Kennedy stands before Congress and makes a promise that borders on madness. Kennedy audio. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. 9 years. The moon. A nation holds its breath, then begins to believe. Here is what NASA knew on the day Kennedy made his promise. Almost nothing. They had 15 minutes of spaceflight experience. Total. Could a human survive a week in the void? Unknown. Could 2 spacecraft dock in orbit? Never been done. Could anything land on the moon and lift off again? No one had the faintest idea. Kennedy bet America's prestige on solving problems no one yet knew how to solve. That's not recklessness. That's faith. In engineers who hadn't been hired yet, building machines that hadn't been imagined yet. James Webb was not a scientist. He was not an engineer. He was something NASA needed more, an organizer of impossible things. Webb understood what others missed. Reaching the moon wasn't a rocket problem, it was a management problem. 400,000 people, 20,000 companies, factories in California, labs in Massachusetts, assembly plants on Long Island, all building pieces of a machine no one had ever seen. Webb's job was to make them work as one. Across America, ordinary people began doing extraordinary work. At MIT, young programmers wrote code for a computer with less memory than a modern greeting card and made it navigate to the moon. On Long Island, Grumman engineers built the lunar module in a factory that once made fighter planes. In California, North American Aviation assembled command modules, one rivet at a time. In Delaware, seamstresses sewed spacesuits by hand. 21 layers of fabric between an astronaut and the void. Each stitch had to be perfect. Each weld. Each line of code. These weren't famous names, they were mothers and fathers, fresh graduates and old hands, people who went home to dinner tables and told their children, "Today, I worked on the spacecraft." Engineers in their 20s made decisions that could kill astronauts, and they made the right ones. The slide rules came out, the calculations began, and piece by piece, the impossible took shape. This is the Apollo guidance computer, 74 kilobytes of memory, a 2 megahertz processor. Your smartphone is millions of times more powerful, and yet, this machine navigated astronauts 240,000 miles to the moon and back. Its memory was woven by hand. Women in factories threaded copper wire through magnetic cores. One thread for a 1, no thread for a 0. They called it rope memory. It took months to weave a single program. There was no room for waste, no space for bloated code. When you cannot have more power, you write better software. The engineers at MIT did exactly that. Constraint became their greatest teacher. Mercury had answered the first question. Could humans survive in space? Now came the harder questions. Could they work there? Could they master the skills that would take them to the moon? Project Gemini would find out. 10 missions in 20 months. A brutal, relentless pace. Each flight pushing further into the unknown. June 3rd, 1965. The hatch opens, and Ed White floats into the void. 23 minutes above the Earth, connected to his spacecraft by nothing but a golden tether. Below him, the Atlantic Ocean. Above him, the infinite black. He somersaults. He grins behind his visor. And, when Mission Control orders him back inside, White says something that captures the pure wonder of exploration. "This is the saddest moment of my life." He had tasted freedom that no human had ever known. Weightless, soaring alone with the planet spinning beneath him. The Soviets had spacewalked first, but in this moment, none of that mattered. Ed White proved that astronauts wouldn't just ride to the moon. They could work outside, in the emptiness itself. March 1966. Gemini 8. Neil Armstrong, a civilian test pilot with ice in his veins, guides his spacecraft toward an unmanned Agena target vehicle. 2 machines hurtling through space at 17,000 miles per hour, closing inch by inch. Contact, lock. The first docking in history, then Dessau. Disaster. A thruster stuck open. The joined spacecraft began to spin. Faster, faster. Armstrong's vision blurred. He was moments from blackout. But Armstrong didn't panic. He disconnected, fired his re-entry thrusters, stopped the spin manually. The mission ended early, but NASA had found something more valuable than a successful docking. They'd found the man who could fly to the moon. By the end of 1966, Gemini had proven everything: spacewalks, docking, 2 weeks in orbit. They were ready for Apollo, ready for the moon. But space does not give up its secrets cheaply, and the price was coming due. 3 men, 3 families, 3 futures written in the stars. Gus Grissom, a veteran, the second American in space, now chosen to command Apollo's first crewed flight. Ed White, the spacewalker who had floated above Earth with a grin, America's golden boy. And Roger Chaffee, the rookie, 31 years old, hungry to prove he belonged among legends. They trained together. They trusted each other. They were ready to make history. January 27th, 1967. A routine test. The spacecraft would never leave the ground, just a rehearsal, a run-through of launch procedures while the capsule sat atop an unfueled rocket. Inside, pure oxygen, standard practice. It made the astronauts' breathing easier, the engineering simpler. No one had questioned it. At 6:31 in the evening, a spark, somewhere in the miles of wiring packed into that tiny cabin. In pure oxygen, everything burns. The crew had 17 seconds. Grissom called out first, "Fire! We've got a fire in the cockpit!" The hatch was designed to open inward. Against the pressure of expanding gases, it would not move. Ground crews sprinted toward the gantry, but there was nothing. Nothing anyone could do. 17 seconds. Then silence. The investigation was merciless, and it had to be. NASA had cut corners, schedule pressure had become a god, and safety its sacrifice. Wiring was sloppy. Flammable materials lined the cabin, that inward opening hatch, a design flaw everyone had accepted. Congress demanded answers. Careers ended. The program itself teetered on the edge of cancellation. But NASA did something remarkable. They didn't defend themselves. They admitted failure. Then they tore the spacecraft apart. Every wire, every switch, every seam, and rebuilt it from nothing. 1,300 changes. A new hatch that opened outward in seconds. A new atmosphere. A new standard. 3 days after the fire, Flight Director Gene Kranz gathered his team in mission control. The room was silent. These were the men who would guide every Apollo mission, if there were any more missions to guide. Kranz looked at them and spoke. From this day forward, flight control will be known by 2 words: tough and competent. He made them write it on their blackboards. He made them carry it in their hearts. Grissom, White, and Chaffee would not die for nothing. Their sacrifice would forge the culture that reached the moon. December 1968, CIA intelligence lands on desks at NASA. The Soviets may attempt a lunar orbit within weeks. America's response is audacious, perhaps reckless. Skip the planned Earth orbit test. Send Apollo 8 directly to the moon. 3 men will travel farther than any humans in history. 250,000 miles from home. Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, Bill Anders. If their engine fails on the far side of the moon, there is no rescue, no second chance. They will drift forever in the dark. On December 21st, Saturn V ignites. Earth shrinks in the window, then disappears entirely. They are the first humans to leave their home planet behind. On their 4th orbit around the moon, the crew is focused downward, mapping craters, photographing landing sites, gray dust, gray rock, a dead world, unchanged for billions of years. Then Borman rotates the spacecraft for a navigation check, and Bill Anders glances out the window. He stops breathing. Rising above the lunar horizon, Earth, blue oceans, white clouds, the whole of human history, everyone who ever lived, suspended in infinite black. Anders scrambles for his camera. "Hand me that roll of color, quick!" He captures what no human eye had ever seen. Not Earth from space, the astronauts had seen that. Earth from somewhere else. Our world as it truly is, small, fragile, borderless, alone, one photograph, and humanity would never see itself the same way again. Christmas Eve, 1968. 1 billion people gather around television sets, the largest audience in human history. From the moon, the crew of Apollo 8 sends a message home. Anders speaks first. "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Lovell continues. Then Borman, the ancient words of Genesis, broadcast across the void. As the transmission ends, Borman adds quietly, "Good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth." From 250,000 miles away, the borders that divided nations were invisible. There was only one world, one humanity, and for one moment, we knew it. March 1969, Apollo 9 puts the lunar module through its paces in Earth orbit. For the first time, astronauts fly a spacecraft that cannot return them home. It works. 2 months later, Apollo 10 takes it further, all the way to the moon. Tom Stafford and Gene Cernan descend to just 50,000 feet above the surface, close enough to see boulders, close enough to name their modules Charlie Brown and Snoopy, close enough to touch. They don't land. That honor belongs to the next crew. But now they know the machine is ready. 8 years since a young president made an impossible promise. After fire, after death, after 400,000 people bent their lives toward a single point in space, Apollo 11 stood ready. The moon waited. July 16, 1969, Cape Kennedy, Florida. 3 men sit atop 3,000 tons of fuel. The Saturn V, the largest machine ever built, 363 feet of American ambition. On the beaches, 1 million people hold their breath. At 9:32 a.m., 5 engines ignite. 7.5 million pounds of thrust. The ground shakes 3 miles away, and slowly, impossibly slowly, the rocket rises. Fire turns morning into noon. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. They're going to the moon 4 days later. The lunar module Eagle separates from Columbia and begins its descent. Inside, Armstrong and Aldrin, falling toward a world no human has touched. Then, alarms. 12:02, 12:01. The guidance computer is overloaded. In Houston, a 26-year-old engineer makes the call. The alarms are manageable. Keep going. But now Armstrong sees the landing site, Boulder Field. He takes manual control, searching for clear ground, while mission control counts down his fuel. 60 seconds remaining. The Eagle skims the surface. 30 seconds. Aldrin calls altitude. Dust swirls blind. Then, contact light. Engine stop. Silence. And from the moon, a voice. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." In mission control, Charlie Duke exhales. "Roger. Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again." 6 hours later, the hatch opens. Neil Armstrong descends the ladder. 9 rungs to history. 600 million people are watching. The largest audience any human being has ever had. His boot hovers above the surface, soil that has waited 4 billion years, untouched, undisturbed, since before life existed on Earth. And then, contact. A single footprint in the lunar dust. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Above him, Earth hangs in the black sky. Small, fragile, home. 250,000 miles away, and every soul on it is watching one of their own stand on another world. Across the Earth, humanity looks up together. Times Square, frozen. Tokyo families gathered around flickering screens. A London pub in stunned silence. In Moscow, Cold War enemy, space race rival, they watch too. For one moment, there are no nations, no borders, no politics, just our species, doing something impossible. A fisherman in the Philippines, a grandmother in Buenos Aires, a child in Cairo who will grow up knowing, we walked on the moon. We did this. All of us. April 13th, 1970. Apollo 13 is 200,000 miles from Earth, further from home than any human being has ever been. Then, a bang. Oxygen tank number 2 ruptures. Commander Jim Lovell watches the gauges fall, power draining, oxygen venting into the void. Through the window he sees it, a cloud of gas streaming from his dying spacecraft. There is no rescue ship, no abort button. 3 men in a metal box, surrounded by nothing but cold and darkness, and 250,000 miles of empty space between them and everyone they love. In Houston, engineers attack the impossible. The lunar module, designed for 2 men for 2 days, must now keep 3 alive for 4. Carbon dioxide is building. The scrubbers in the command module won't fit the lunar module's system. Square pegs, round holes. So a team dumps a box of parts onto a table, cardboard, plastic bags, duct tape, and says, "Make it work." They do. Flight controllers calculate a slingshot trajectory around the moon, by slide rule, by hand. 400,000 people, one problem. Failure is not an option. 4 days of cold, 4 days of uncertainty. The heat shield may have cracked in the explosion. They won't know until re-entry. The spacecraft hits the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. Radio blackout. 3 minutes of silence. Then, parachutes bloom against blue sky. Splashdown. They're alive. In mission control, grown men weep. They brought them home. 12 years. From a Soviet beep that terrified a nation, to boot prints in lunar dust, 400,000 people built this miracle. Engineers with slide rules, seamstresses stitching spacesuits by hand, programmers coding guidance systems with less computing power than your kitchen appliances. They didn't have the technology, so they invented it. They didn't know the math, so they discovered it. They didn't know it was impossible, so they did it anyway. This is what humans can accomplish when we commit. When we refuse to accept can't. When 400,000 people work toward one impossible goal, the impossible becomes a footprint on the moon. They went to explore the moon. What they discovered was Earth. A blue marble suspended in endless black. No borders visible from space, no armies, no flags, just home, fragile, alone, ours. We went to the moon, and we found ourselves. For the 400,000 who built it, for the astronauts who rode the fire, and for Gus, Ed, and Roger, who never came home from that launch pad, but whose sacrifice made every footprint possible. On the moon, there is no wind. That boot print remains, undisturbed, eternal, a testament to what we can do when we refuse to accept impossible.